Hello everyone and welcome back to Mezzo Medic and the CV Building for Medical Students series. My name is Kitty and I'm an academic junior doctor working in the UK. Today we'll be talking about opportunities to do some teaching as a medical student. Now, teaching is probably one of the harder areas to address on your CV as a student simply because at such a junior stage you lack the credentials to deliver medical teaching. However, it is not impossible to do and gets easier as you progress through medical school and indeed your career. In this video, we'll first be going over the scoring criteria for teaching at a postgraduate level, and then go over various teaching opportunities that you might be able to do at a local, regional and national level. We'll also discuss the basics of how to prepare a teaching session, and finally any non-medical education opportunities and developing yourself as a clinical teacher. As always, we'll start with having a look at an example scoring criteria for teaching. This particular scoring criteria is taken from the Core Surgical Training Portfolio Checklist from 2020, but the weighting of the points is probably similar across other specialties as well. So taking a look at this criteria, to score minimal points, you will have had taught medical students or other healthcare professionals occasionally with evidence of formal feedback. So this would be things like a one-off teaching session that you do now and then with a certificate saying that you've done it or some feedback from the students. The next rung up is having provided regular teaching for healthcare professionals and medical students over a period of approximately 3 months or longer, again with evidence of feedback. So this is something like if you're doing peer-to-peer teaching for your medical school, you've continued to do that regularly, so let's say once every 2 weeks or so for a period of over 3 months, then it would qualify. To score the highest points, you will have to organise a local teaching program, and the only difference in this particular instance between the second highest and the highest points is working with local tutors to deliver this program or delivering it by yourself. So, if you're aiming for the 6 points region, you might as well aim for the highest points here. And again, it's about contributing regularly to teaching, so again once every 2 weeks or so over a period of approximately 3 months or longer with evidence of feedback. Now, aside from delivering actual teaching itself, in a lot of specialties you can also score some points for having had formal training for teaching. This is pretty much almost exclusively a postgraduate activity, but let's go over it anyways. So you can score 2 points for having training in teaching methods lasting no longer than 2 days or some online module to some evidence that you've attended it, so just a certificate. To score 3 points, you will have to attend a more substantial course that lasts more than 2 days with evidence to demonstrate this. And lastly, to score maximum points, you will have had to have extensive training in teaching through the means of a PG Cert, a PG Dip, or a Masters in Medical Education. So what opportunities are there for medical teaching? As I said in the beginning of this video, as you progress through medical school, you have more opportunity to teach as you gain more medical knowledge and also experience of clinical placements and exams. There is of course nothing stopping you from teaching whatever you like to whoever you like, but just be aware that at your postgraduate interview, they may question you slightly if you say that you've been teaching students or even doctors that are beyond your grade. At a local level, there are plenty of opportunities to do some teaching in the form of peer-to-peer teaching as part of your medical school, providing teaching as part of a society at medical school, for example teaching ECGs as part of a cardiology society, or suturing workshops for the surgical society. You can hold revision sessions for students in the lower years, which are usually well received, and you can also do some bedside teaching as your medical school allows. Regional teaching programs are probably a bit harder to organise by yourself, but sometimes you can do this as part of a larger national society with regional branches. For example, StarSearch, which is a national student research collaborative, advises its regional reps to hold a presentation on academic surgery every year in their respective regions. Nationally, you can teach as a part of a national society, which is possible as a medical student, but you have rather limited options because for any specialty groups they probably wouldn't want a medical student to be delivering any of their courses. However, you can often still get some points by being involved in the course preparation process, like advertising, sourcing materials for the course, identifying speakers, and helping with other preparatory work. You can also organise a national teaching course by yourself, which is harder to do but very possible with good organisation and management. And is actually more accessible now during the middle of the pandemic when all of the teaching is kind of online anyway. If you are organising your own course, you may want to invite more experienced speakers like specialty trainees or consultants to deliver the harder parts of your course that maybe you yourself aren't qualified to teach. In terms of preparing for a teaching session, this can essentially be split down to a couple parts: choosing a topic to teach, deciding on a teaching format, recruiting other local tutors, preparing your resources, and gathering feedback. In terms of choosing a topic you like, ultimately you can teach whatever you want to. However, I would take the following into consideration. Firstly, you probably want to choose a topic that you already have some prior knowledge on. Preparing for a teaching session is no small feat, and a lot of planning is required. If you already have prior knowledge and good understanding of a topic, it will be much easier for you to put together a resource compared to starting from scratch and having to read around the topic yourself. In addition, if you already have good in-depth understanding of the topic, you may be able to answer more surprising questions that come up that might be beyond the scope of what you're teaching. There's of course no harm in saying you don't know in a teaching session, especially when you're a medical student, but it is more beneficial for everyone involved if you do know the answers or know more about the topic than is required at your level. You also want to consider teaching about specialty topics that you're interested in or passionate about. Teaching others is often a great way for you to learn the topic yourself as well, since you often have to read around the topic and understand the material before delivering and explaining it to others. So if you have a particular specialty in mind or a topic that you're interested in, or maybe you're doing some research or an audit project on something, doing teaching on this topic is probably a good excuse for you to do some background reading around it as well. Demonstrating teaching in your specialty of choice also demonstrates commitment to your clinical specialty, which is something that is very valuable to talk about in interviews. And finally, because case-based learning is now a very popular method of teaching, think about memorable patients that you've met or interesting clinical cases that you've came across as part of your clinical placements. A good clinical case or vignette can prompt a very good medical discussion in your small group teaching. In terms of the teaching format, especially if you're someone who is interested in medical education, you want to demonstrate that you can employ a range of teaching methods. This can include bedside teaching, small group tutorials which can be didactic or interactive, formal lectures, and practical skills sessions. In terms of finding local tutors to really satisfy that top scoring mark on our scoring criteria, you can consider asking other students and fellow peers to help you, more senior colleagues as we mentioned before, which is especially good for topics that maybe you don't feel confident delivering yourself, and sometimes even lay patients who can share the experiences of the group. It is worth noting that the more teachers you get involved in your teaching program, the harder it will be to organize, because then there's more people's availability and dates that you need to take into account. I think it's good to be able to spread the workload between a number of different tutors, but just be aware that having too many people is not always the solution. In terms of preparing your resources for teaching, it goes without saying that you should be really well prepared for your session. Teaching aids like a PowerPoint or handouts can be very useful for students and yourself, and try and incorporate interactive elements like questions that are in the format of the exams so that students can be more engaged throughout your session. And finally, and probably most importantly for any teaching session that you do, you need to ensure that you've gathered feedback. You can create a generic feedback form on Google Forms which you can adapt to most of your teaching sessions, but essentially it should cover how your attendees found the session in terms of the structure, the organization, and the content. And the form should also enable your attendees to highlight some strengths and weaknesses of your teaching session so that you can reflect on this and develop on it. If possible, you should also get a consultant to oversee your teaching program and provide some formal feedback in the form of a letter at the end of it. So we've talked about opportunities to deliver medically related teaching, but what if you are a very junior student who isn't senior enough to provide this? Well, you can always demonstrate your teaching skills through a non-medically related opportunity. Some ideas for this is tutoring high school students for their A-level subjects, initiatives to help high school students get into medical school, so for example, teaching on interview skills or AMCAT on the UK CAT, and you can also do some teaching to the lay public, for example, CPR skills. And finally, let's talk briefly about developing the clinical teacher. As we said at the beginning of this video, there is a section on your medical CV where you can score points for having had formal training for teaching. Most of these courses are only really offered at a postgraduate level, so we won't go into too much detail here, but I think it's a good idea to be aware of this so that when you do graduate, you then have an idea of how to get the rest of these points. So essentially there are a number of less formal teaching that you can do, which may be an online module which you can score the kind of minimum level of points for. For more formal teaching lasting more than 2 days, there's really only the 1 or 2 courses nationally that everyone attends, and that's training the trainers courses. And to score the highest points, you have had to have a high degree in medical education, and the majority of people probably won't be scoring this. If you are interested in medical education, however, and you want to explore options to get a PG cert or a PG diploma or a master's in education, a potential option you can consider is the Academic Foundation program with an education theme, which often offers you the opportunity to get a PG cert during your 2 years of foundation years training, after which you can then pursue a master's in education. If you want to learn a bit more about the AFP, I've made a video on this which is on my channel that you can check out. And that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found this useful. If you're wondering about other ways to build your CV as a medical student, I have a series on this on my channel which you can check out right here. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you liked the video, and subscribe so that you can keep updated when the next video comes out. That's it for now, and I'll see you next time.